Hi everyone, thank you for coming. As many of you may already know, my name is Cheyenne Stoner and I am the Wildlife Conservation Intern for the National Bighorn Sheep Center. I am a student at the University of Wyoming, going into my senior year studying wildlife and fisheries, biology and management with a minor in zoology. As part of my internship, I was asked to create a presentation about my experiences over the summer and share with you some of my highlights and learning experiences. With that being said, let's get started. This is a little bit of an overview of what my presentation will look like. I will start off by introducing the internship and its goals. Then I will categorize it into 4 main objectives and explain how my experiences link back to the goals of this internship. This internship was organized by the Board of Directors at the National Bighorn Sheep Center. They realized the complexity of outreach and education relative to the current and future conservation of natural resources. The board partnered with Marav Ben David, head of the zoology department at the University of Wyoming, who leads the wildlife curriculum, and worked to create an internship program that connects people from many different backgrounds and encourages them to become involved in conservation efforts. In hopes of connecting both current and future wildlife resource managers, the Sheep Center contacted a number of different agencies and personnel to participate in the program. About 50% of the intern's summer would be dedicated to shadowing and assisting in these agencies' conservation efforts. The other half of the summer is spent helping the Sheep Center with education and outreach events, museum tours, and gift shop coverage. The objectives of the internship are laid out below. The intern will be responsible for implementing educational programs and outreach events, providing support in the museum and gift shop, complete offsite shadowing, and keeping a narrative of activities associated with their shadowing experiences. I'm going to explain each of these objectives in more detail and will explain how my experiences link back to each. To start off, we have implementing educational programs and outreach events. To summarize, here at the National Bighorn Sheep Center, our mission is to provide education and outreach for the conservation of wild sheep, wildlife, and wildlands. To summarize my experience at the Sheep Center, I focused on the education and outreach events that I participated in, splitting them into 2 separate categories. First off is educational programs. I determined educational events to be those that our main focus was educating kids. The Sheep Center does a great job of participating in the wildlife community and encouraging kids to engage in conservation. In May, Shayla and I set up a booth at the Wyoming Outdoor Weekend and Expo in Lander, where we set up our touch table and taught kids about migration with an activity outside. We also went to the Lights On program in Du Bois, where we taught kids about pollination with the sugary activity. It was fun because I used to work with my mom at a honey booth at the farmers markets, so I was able to tell them some cool facts about bees and honey. In June, the staff and I attended the Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation banquet in Cheyenne and taught kids how to score bighorn sheep horns. Steve also brought a leather stamping activity with us, which was a big hit. Just a couple weeks ago, the Sheep Center hosted their annual kids camp, Camp Bighorn, and I was able to help out with some logistics and coordinating camp activities, especially outdoor activities like water and fire ecology, taxidermy, and the evolution of weaponry. At camp, a number of wildlife conservationists came out to talk to the kids, one being Chester Moore. I enjoyed learning about their careers, passions, and the reasons why they became involved with conservation. But the best part of these events was watching the kids develop an interest in conservation. As far as campus outreach, the Sheep Center was able to host and participate in a number of different events. I was still in school, but I was able to come to the annual spring cleanup in April. I was introduced to the wonderful staff here and worked hard to get the center cleaned up after a long winter. On July 3rd, the center hosted their 30th anniversary. I was able to welcome folks to celebrate 30 years of conservation education, inform visitors of the Sheep Center's mission, and take in donations for the Bighorn Bash. We also hosted Gray and Renee Thornton, President and CEO of the National Wild Sheep Foundation and Chair of Women Hunt, respectively. We were so pleased to have them visit the National Bighorn Sheep Center and thank them for their generosity and dedication to our organization. On the 4th of July, we were able to reach over 2,000 individuals through the Du Bois annual 4th of July parade. And just to clear everything up, Cinder is my favorite coworker. On the 28th of July, I wore pink and passed around a hat for donations at the Du Bois Rodeo, working for Casting for Recovery and supporting their cause of enhancing the lives of women with breast cancer by connecting them to each other and nature through the therapeutic sport of fly fishing. Working with Casting for Recovery relates to my internship because they have a similar mission to the National Bighorn Sheep Center, encouraging people to get in touch with nature and conserving the ability to do so. Over the summer, I was able to participate in all of these education and outreach events. Not only was I able to reach the public and educate about conservation, but I also learned something new at each and every event. I learned how nonprofit organizations like the Sheep Center use their resources to reach so many different people. Advertising is a huge part of what these types of organizations do, something I never really thought of, but discovered how important it truly is. The main objective of the internship is to provide support in the museum and gift shop. The majority of my time that I spent at the center this summer was dedicated to welcoming visitors of different backgrounds and from all over the world. We had a couple in the museum from Israel just the other day. It was interesting to see how many people travel through Du Bois to visit Yellowstone and take the time to learn about the sheep. I ran the front desk and collected both admission fees and donations from the point of sale system. I also helped maintain the center by cleaning exhibits, bathrooms, and countertops, as well as collecting and restocking inventory. I also helped Michelle with some social media posts, highlighting gift shop items and posting wildlife facts, especially about the bighorn sheep. My favorite thing to tell people is how sheep have special padding on their hooves to help them climb up. Another big part of working at the center was giving out tours to groups of people of all ages and backgrounds. Not only was I able to teach other people about wild sheep and conservation, but my own knowledge about these topics grew exponentially over the summer. We hosted school groups from all over the state, as well as other educational programs such as Road Scholars, SOAR, and many others. I think my favorite part about working in the gift shop was being able to help so many people. I would always get questions about where to eat in town or where the best place to see the sheep are. We would give them maps to where they could find the sheep, directing them to the Torrey Valley and its petroglyphs. I also looked forward to answering their questions and helping in any way I could. Working in the gift shop this summer allowed me to improve my social skills. I started the summer with some customer service experience, working farmers markets with my mom. Excuse me. But I was really able to step out of my comfort zone this summer, greeting visitors and welcoming them to our museum. Professional communication was something that I really wanted to work on during this internship, and I greatly improved my ability to communicate with others. I was able to incorporate these skills into my shadowing opportunities by contacting a number of professionals and asking to shadow them and learn more about their careers. Problem solving was a big part of my summer as well. I think one of the biggest challenges I had in the gift shop specifically was knowing my role for events and programs we either hosted or participated in. For Camp Bighorn, I was unsure if I was going to cover the gift shop or help at camp, so instead of waiting to be told what I would be doing, I took initiative and spoke with the camp coordinator about which days they needed help. It was later decided that I was to spend the whole week up there, and I had a lot of fun. The past 3 months, I was working alongside gift shop staff and was able to build friendships with all of them. I have gotten to know the staff very well and hope our paths cross again in the future. It is because of their encouragement and thoughtfulness that I was not only able to step out of my comfort zone, but gain a larger appreciation for the conservation education. The next part of the internship was to complete offsite shadowing. At the start of the summer, it was my responsibility to contact individuals whom Steve had asked to participate in shadowing opportunities. I sat down with Steve one day, went down the list of wildlife professionals, and introduced myself over the phone. From there, I contacted them personally to schedule dates in the field. Once I had some days lined up, I filled out the volunteer forms for each agency. From there, I kept in touch with each person and confirmed dates and locations to meet them. In preparation for the shadowing experience, I would research the project I was helping out with and write down a number of questions to ask the professionals when I was with them. I would ask them things like their favorite part of the job, their biggest challenges, as well as their degree and level of education they received to attain their position. In total this summer, I was able to spend 22 days in the field. The majority of that time was spent with game and fish as well as the Forest Service. To track of my shadowing experiences, I kept a narrative of each experience as well as pictures to go with them. Although each experience was different, I was able to categorize them into 3 domains: habitat management, wildlife and population health, and human interactions. First, we're going to look at habitat management. With Game and Fish, I participated in a number of different weed surveys. The first one I did was the cheatgrass survey on Torrey Rim. I also did some other invasive species surveys over the summer, including toadflax, mullein, thistle, knapweed, and other noxious weeds to Wyoming. The purpose of weed surveys are to determine how many non-native and noxious weeds are in the area, taking over the native grasses and plants that the wildlife eat. If we know where the weeds are, we can treat those areas and restore native grasses and plants, improving the habitat for the bighorn sheep and other wildlife as well. After assisting in these surveys, I gained experience in running transects using the Doppelmayr to determine percent ground cover, grass species identification, as well as navigating the landscape using GPS and waypoints. I spent the majority of my summer working with Amy Anderson and her Tech Maggie from Game and Fish, as well as Joe Flower and his Tech Maggie from the Forest Service. They were working on a bunch of joint projects this summer, and I was able to help them out a lot. For this particular project, we were looking at the aspen regeneration after a conifer removal project on Fossil Hill and Sinks Canyon. Aspen is the second most diverse habitat for wildlife in the state, harboring over 200 different wildlife species. Over half of the historic acreage of this habitat has been lost in the last 100 years, and conifers have been encroaching upon these historic landscapes. In order to regenerate aspens, government agencies are using prescribed burns to treat habitat and mitigate the presence of conifers. To determine if the treatment is effective, photo points were installed to capture aspen growth post-treatment. In July, we took some post-treatment photos in different areas, as well as retook some photos from areas that had been treated roughly 5 years ago. We were able to see some regrowth of aspens, as well as some new recruitment, showing that the treatment was working. From this experience, I gained knowledge in installing photo points, using Avenza software, and completing aspen circles. My favorite habitat management project this summer was constructing beaver dam analogs. They are artificial beaver dams that people build to help restore riparian areas, important habitats for connecting migration corridors for many different animal species. I spent 3 days helping repair old dams and building new ones. We pounded posts in a line perpendicular to the bank and stacked them with sod and willow branches to prevent water from flowing through the dam. We would then notch the center at the top area of the dam to encourage flow over the top and not around the sides of the bank. The few days that I spent out there were long and tiring, but I loved working in the water and spending time getting to know so many different people who were dedicated to the project. What I really gained experience in, I classified as wildlife and population health. One of the very first shadow experiences I had this summer was in mid-June with the Game and Fish Lander District wildlife biologist, Zach Gregory. We drove out to Shoshone and did some sage-grouse leks surveys. Leks are a patch of ground used for communal display in the breeding season by males of certain birds and mammals. Each male defends a small territory in order to attract males or females for mating. Zach said that we were a little late to see an actual lek for this time of year, but it was still cool to drive out there and learn how sage-grouse location alters depending on the time of year. We also found a horny toad. Game and Fish counts critters in a number of different ways, from aerial surveys to counting out populations to gill nets to count fish species. For some birds like grouse, Game and Fish can determine the health of a population by the number of males in the area. The more males, the healthier the population. The best time to determine population counts for sage grouse are when they are in leks, where males display dominance over an area and attract females for breeding rates. Did you know that 40 to 50% of national sage grouse populations are found just in western Wyoming? I was able to get out with Pat Nilica from the Fish and Wildlife Service out of Lander on multiple locations this summer. To give a bit of a backstory, there is a long-term agreement between the Wind River Indian Reservation and the Fish and Wildlife Service that allows federal agencies to assist in the management of wildlife on the reservation. It was a cool opportunity to be able to see places that not everyone gets to see. Pat and I went out to the Owl Creek Mountains on the Wind River Indian Reservation and set up some bat detectors in 3 different elevations across the range. The purpose of this was to determine what species of bats are in the area and how many of each kind. I didn't know this until I met Pat, but there are over 10 different species of bats in Wyoming, each with a specific sound, kind of like songbirds, but they are undetectable to the human ear. The acoustic bat detectors are able to pick up those sounds and collect the data on the bats. Bats are not something I originally pictured wildlife biologists working with, but after working with Pat, I was able to appreciate them more and understand their importance to the diversity of the ecosystem. From this experience alone, I gained knowledge about bats, their habitat, number of species, as well as detector installation, data collection, and reservation dynamics. I was able to participate in 3 different mule deer collar retrievals this summer. The first 2, I was with Pat Millica, and we traveled on the reservation to find those collars. The first one was up a really steep cliff, and I found out pretty fast that to become a fish and wildlife biologist, I had to get in better shape. The second collar was on a little bit easier terrain to hike, but it was a bit longer of a walk. Either way, it was fun to get out in the field and learn about telemetry and how radio collars work. Each collar has a transmitter that sends signals to a receiver, and when the animal hasn't moved in a certain amount of time, the transmitter sends out a mortality signal, a beep, to the receiver, which can be located using an antenna. As the receiver gets closer to the transmitter, the beep gets louder and directs you to the collar. I was also able to go out with Rebecca from Teton National Park and retrieve a mule deer collar on the Idaho border. It was a long drive over there, but Rebecca let me do the navigating and telemetry by myself. It was cool to do it all on my own, but the terrain we were in had a lot of rolling hills, so I gained a lot of experience working with bounce and was able to find the collar. Bounce is when the signal bounces off the terrain and makes it difficult to pinpoint the collar. From these excursions, I was able to gain experience in telemetry, land navigation, and determining the cause of death of the animal. The deer that I found with Pat died from predation from a mountain lion, which we determined because of the caching, storing kills under grass, or hiding it in bushes, and the collar I found with Rebecca was programmed to fall off at a certain time, so I didn't have to complete a necropsy for that deer. The purpose of these mule deer collars is to track the details of migration, showing where the animals go during the summer and how they access the winter range. Over the years, collar data has shown that the deer spend the summer in the Tetons and migrate to 7 different locations, including Idaho Falls, the South Fork by Cody, and the Red Desert south of Pinedale. Another one of my favorite activities that I shadowed this summer was gill nets. I was able to pull an overnight net with Pat Millica and a couple hour-long nets with Jake Ruthven, the fisheries biologist for Game and Fish in London. Gill nets are a method used to determine populations of fish in bodies of water, as well as their health. If the fish that are caught in the net are long in length but don't weigh a whole lot, then the biologists know that the population isn't that healthy. From the data they collect, they can make management decisions about the best method to help populations grow in size, number, and health. I always thought I wanted to focus on the terrestrial part of wildlife biology, working with ungulates and large game, but after doing some gill nets this summer, I found out I really like working with fish and will be more open to an array of things in my job search in the future. Butterfly food was something that I was unaware of at the beginning of the summer. I'm not very good with birds, but now I want to take an ornithology class before I graduate. The Forest Service completes surveys annually to detect the presence of many different birds of prey across the state. Raptors are an important species in sustaining healthy ecosystems by controlling rodent populations and insects that damage the timber as well as the forest health. A number of bird populations are declining due to habitat loss and degradation. The National Forest provides these animals with protected habitat in order to study and learn more about them. Since we didn't see or hear any goshawks, this tells scientists that the forest is not as healthy as it could be, and allows them to alter their management strategies to improve the stability of the ecosystem. With the goshawk surveys, I was able to gain experience with Foxtrot, which is the calling device, Avenza, transects, data collection, as well as land navigation. Moving on, the final category is human interactions. My very first traveling experience was with Brian Baker, the senior game warden for the Du Bois region in Wyoming. I went on a ride along with him, and we were supposed to drive around the public fishing areas and check fishing licenses. Unfortunately, it rained the entire day, so we couldn't find any fishermen. Instead, we drove around the boundary of Brian's district and visited about his job as a game warden, the highs and lows, as well as some of his most memorable experiences he has from the last 25 years at Game and Fish. Brian said that people are his most and least favorite part of the job. He told me that he has met some really cool people over the years, but have also had some unpleasant experiences with others. The ride along was very exciting, and we even found some bear tracks. I had guessed they were grizzly tracks based on the size, as well as the claw marks that were about 2 inches from the pad. But Brian said there was an easier way to tell the difference. He folded his Leatherman into a straight line and held it against the toe prints. Brian explained that if all 5 toes are in line with each other, then it's a grizzly bear track. If the outside toe is below the rest, then it's a black bear. It was really interesting to learn about Brian's job as well as some of the landscape around Du Bois. The ride-along was the first time I was able to really get outside and learn about the different public and state lands around Du Bois, as well as how they are managed. The final human interaction experience I had this summer was at the Whiskey Mountain Conservation Camp. I was helping out with the boys camp that Game and Fish puts on every year, one of many hosted throughout the summer season. I was able to learn the ins and outs of hosting conservation camps for youth groups, what kinds of things they teach about, as well as some of the history of the camp in the Torrey Valley. Another thing we taught the kids was how to use their bear spray and what to do if you encounter a bear. Over the week, it was cool to watch the kids build friendships with each other, even though they came from different backgrounds. Over the summer, I had some great experiences. I did face a few challenges, but didn't let those disappointing moments get the best of my summer. One of the hardest parts of my summer was trying to contact field professionals and set up dates I could shadow. It was a bit disappointing when I wasn't able to get a hold of them or some never called me back. Another difficulty was when I had a shadowing day on a Monday. I could not call or text to confirm the day before because a lot of the field personnel did not work on weekends. In order to avoid this issue, I had to contact people on the Thursday or Friday before and confirm dates, times, and locations. I also learned the hard way to watch for branches when completing aspen circles. My absolute most favorite part about this summer, and you can ask anyone at the Sheep Center, was working on the Beaver Dam Analog project. I just loved being in the water during a hot day and enjoyed the manual labor part of the task. Another thing I enjoyed a lot was the gill nets. I mentioned this earlier, but I will say it again. I have found a new appreciation for this fish and look forward to finding a job in the future that deals with both terrestrial and aquatic species. This summer, I spent a lot of time walking around and collecting data in the field. I even worked on my days off by going on hikes and running so I could keep up with all the other people in the field and not slow them down. I even took my parents to find one of the sheep traps in the area. Another thing I learned this summer was that I can look at federal agencies for work in the future. Before this internship, I thought that Game and Fish was my only option for finding wildlife-related work in the field. I did not realize that the Forest Service also hires seasonal technicians. By understanding this, I have broadened my horizons for my job search next year. Just last week, I updated my resume after this summer's experience and asked both Pat Nilica and Amy Anderson if I could use them as a reference, to which they both agreed. I spent quite a bit of time with both of them these past 3 months, and I was able to gain a lot of field experience because of their dedication to the future of wildlife conservation. As soon as I get back to Laramie, I will be sharing this presentation with the UW student chapter of the Wildlife Society, as well as helping to recruit future interns for this amazing program. After I graduate at the University of Wyoming next spring, I plan on working a few seasonal jobs, then exploring the possibility of grad school and working with beaver dams, hoping to improve beaver dam analog structures. I have found a passion for working in the field and believe that anything I do will make me happy as long as it involves wildlife. But who knows, I might end up across the country studying marine biology, or maybe I'll become a beaver and build beaver dams for the rest of my life. The possibilities are endless. I just wanted to take a few moments here to finish off my presentation by thanking the wonderful people who built a support system for me this summer. To the National Bighorn Sheep Center staff and board of directors who made this internship a once-in-a-lifetime experience, I cannot thank you enough. Thank you to all the agencies I shadowed, including U.S. Forest Service, Wyoming Game and Fish Department, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the National Park Service. I had a wonderful time learning about your careers. The experiences I had this summer have helped me understand what I want my future to look like. Thank you to the National and Wyoming chapter of the Wild Sheep Foundation who have supported me through this internship. I could not have done this without the support from all of you. I would also like to thank Tom and Shelley Botts who funded this wildlife conservation internship. Steve Kilpatrick, Sarah Bridge, thanks for believing in me.